Right, as you're all taking a seat there, can I just ask, I want to ask you one question first of all, Adrian. There are a few questions that I'm going to get to on that, but can you just clarify for me, and I suspect for some of us here, the role of this new vaccine in terms of you've given us a comprehensive disease control system in place, which is what the auditors want to come and have a look at. So what role does the vaccine play within that package? It's not yet completely ready, but nonetheless it offers a complementarity, presumably.
I think, David, that's the perfect way of putting it. And this is a good opportunity to explain to everybody, because we very often read in the press new protocols, this, that. It's not actually a new protocol. The European Union, as I said in my initial address, has in place a number of requirements which we must meet. We hadn't met them in the past. We believe we now do. The test on that is, of course, the audit. Looking at vaccine, a live vaccine provides a very good level of coverage. We're now able to test to decide and work out whether the vaccine has caused problems or not. We know that our previous outbreaks in the surveillance zone were caused by vaccine. The fact that we're using a live vaccine poses no threat to the international community, because if we have an outbreak, we simply get banned for another 2 years. What it does do for us in the longer term is totally diminish that risk of us having more downtime. So it's an internal benefit more than a safety measure for export and trade.
Right, and the auditors are just a few weeks away from landing here to assess the situation. What then is the timeline? I mean, how does that, when do you get a result from that?
Well, it's a fairly prescribed process, David. The audit runs from the 20th of April to the 1st of May. We then expect mid-May to late May to receive the audit report. And an audit report is not something that comes out quite simply, yes, you passed, no, you failed. Anybody that's ever gone through an audit of any kind knows that auditors are always going to come with recommendations. South Africa then responds with how they're going to address those recommendations. Once that's finalized, it goes out for a 3-week inter-service consultation period within the European Union. We expect that process to be concluded mid to late July. And that's important because the next step is you go to the plant, animal, food and feed committees with the European Commission's recommendation. We expect to go before the committees there in September. I say September because, as anybody from Europe here knows, August is not a month that a lot happens in Europe. It's,
I lived in Brussels for many years. July is pretty much the same, actually. So,
that's why I've said September. And then that process could go over 1 or 2 PAF committee meetings. So where we're looking with a successful outcome of an audit, from audit to export, October, November.
Okay, so
that is our time frame.
You're not pushing on the champagne corks just yet. You've got a long process still to go. But let me ask you this, if I can, to move it on a little bit. How big a deal is it for you? Obviously, it's a big deal because it's been hanging there for a long time and this has not been resolved. I get that. But, I mean, with one of your former hats on as Managing Director for Cape Thoroughbred Racing, how big a deal is this for the racing industry and for breeders in South Africa?
I believe it's massive. As I said in my first address, we've been living in splendid isolation. For people to buy horses here now, let's just start with a proven horse. You go from here to Mauritius. You spend 90 days in Mauritius. If you take that 90 days as a percentage of a horse's racing career, it's massive. And as many of our trainers, especially Mike de Kock, who's the most successful South African trainer with taking horses internationally, will tell you, the loss of bone density, the other issues, getting those horses back to peak fitness. You know, it's a dream to spend 90 days on an island, you know. Mauritius is a wonderful place to go. But any athlete, after 90 days on the beach in Mauritius, is not going to be in tip-top form. And to regain that is just too long for the majority of people. We're busy talking with Hong Kong here today and the whole week. Look at the system in Hong Kong. People have permits, they have seasons, they have limited time frames for delivery. I think South Africa's got a world-class product. And if you take away the fact that it's horses and just concentrate on any old product, it doesn't matter how good your product is. If your distribution channels don't work properly, it really, really affects your business. That's what it means to us. It lets us re-enter, or really not re-enter, but for the first time get onto the world stage. It doesn't create us as a massive threat for the rest of the world. It creates us as a partner that will also then be purchasing new genetics, new blood, trading internationally. We're just another country then on the world scene to the benefit of all.
Batty, could I ask you a question then, based on what Adrian was referring to then, about the duration, the period of time that animals currently, if you're going via Mauritius, are going to have to spend before they're ever going to get anywhere, and it's almost theoretical, it's so long. But what difference does this protocol mean in terms of simple horse health, animal health?
Well, I'm looking more on the side of the vaccine, coming up with a non-replicating vaccine, an inactivated vaccine. I think taking away that step, I think horses will be much more healthier moving directly instead of this kind of transition. I think the way things are happening now, it's impacting also, I would think, in the performance and the health of the horses. So removing those kind of steps definitely will have a huge impact on the horses.
Right. We've talked, Andrew, about, or we've heard a lot actually about this public-private partnership and how well it has worked, and we'll get a little bit of a reference to what that means and how that sustains going forward. The ARF and Hong Kong Jockey Club have been involved in assisting on an international level. How great a role can that international part play, do you think? Not just in this case, but in similar cases. How instrumental has it been?
I think what we're seeing play out here does have a broader relevance. The mission of the International Federation of Horse Racing Authorities is to promote international racing, to promote the globalisation of racing, and it's a mission to which the ARF is equally committed. We've taken that a step further in terms of trying to ensure that movement of horses, which is an essential precondition for the internationalisation of races, that we are systematic in progressing that. So, for example, some years ago, the International Federation entered into a confederation relationship with the FEI. Louis Romanet was the first chair, and now Ingmar de Vos, the president of the FEI, is chair of the International Horse Sports Confederation. As Batty said, the candidate vaccine study, that was an International Horse Sports Confederation venture. But if I look at it also in terms of ARF, this is really important to the ARF because, as Winfred always says, the conferences are very important as a marketplace of ideas, but we've also then got to convert the ideas into action. And we're seeing that actions have been taken on illegal gambling. International commingling has been championed by the ARF and is being implemented. So too here, when we talk about internationalisation of racing and in facilitating the international movement of horses, we've got to take concrete steps to make that a reality. That's very important to the ARF.
And Adrian says for South Africa it's massive. What is it for Asian racing? Well,
it's a means of living that mission of the internationalisation of racing. It's assisting a member, a long-standing member of the Asian Racing Federation. It's delivering the promise that international racing offers to all of us. International racing is stronger now because of the steps that Korea's taken, and the ARF's been happy to play some small part in assisting it. It's stronger, more durable, more interesting as a product because of that. And so too, international racing will be stronger, more interesting, will have greater value propositions in so many ways if South Africa, with its undoubted talent, we see the talent on the world stage in terms of jockeys and trainers, if the quality of the bloodstock can also be fully seen on the world stage, that will be a very good thing for the region and for world racing.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got a few specifics for you as well here coming from our audience. John, maybe you could help us on a couple of these. Do working horses and donkeys move under permit as well? Do they have to have a permit?
Yes, in short, if they're coming from the infected zone, absolutely. We don't have that many working horses, and in fact in the Cape we've got a very, very small population of cart horses. There are about 270 of them. We've done some research work into them, and we're quite involved, and they are also included in our Sentinel program. But they're not moving between zones very often. And then we do some outreach. There are two indigent populations in Saron and in Greyton, which are in our controlled area, and we do outreach work, make sure their vaccinations are up to date and appropriate, and educate them on movement control. But again, they're not moving populations of working horses, but they are on our radar for sure. Yeah.
Right, and related to that, because you mentioned it earlier, and there's a question come in here about zebra as well, as registered, all zebra registered. Just a question here, does that include all zebra or zebra, private reserves and conservation parks in South Africa?
In the Western Cape, it includes every zebra holding in the Western Cape. It's a provincial conservation authority that's responsible for that. And we register every zebra property in the Western Cape on our system. And then zebra, while for horses we only issue movement permits or notifications for horses moving into zones of higher control, for zebra, any zebra moving into or out of the controlled area requires a permit. So even moving from Cape Town to Mossel Bay, for instance, would require a permit issued by us as well. So zebra have got a double permit system.
Double permit system. Okay, and Paul, I have a question for you as well here, and this relates to the horse industry, but the non-racing part of it, if you like. So organisations not involved in horse racing, are they part of this current partnership with the government?
I would say yes, they are, because we have agreed that we need to drive to a common goal. In as much as they may not be part of the racing industry, they do appreciate disease control, and in particular, movements into the Western Cape for whatever dressage and other activities when they come from up north country.
So effectively, it's equestrian across the piece.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, we've got 3 breed registering authorities in South Africa, and they're the formal bodies that we work with. The Horse Racing Authority is one of them, and then we've got the Warm Blood Association of South Africa, and then Studbook, who manage 19 different breeds. And so, for what it's worth, American saddlebreds, for instance, are the second most moved breed in South Africa into the controlled area because of the shows that they do outside of the controlled area. And then Arabs form a big part of the movement requirements, particularly when export is open as well. They're one of the big users of actual export from South Africa, the Arab breed.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for the clarification there of these questions. And I have one other, which is, why would a horse not be granted permission for vaccination for African horse sickness? Is that a valid question?
Yeah, for sure. So if its passport's not a registered passport with one of these breed registering authorities, we don't issue it permission. If the vaccination is not requested, if a veterinarian is not associated with the vaccination, we don't give permission. Every vaccination in a controlled area must be done by a registered veterinarian. So those are 2 examples of where we might not issue vaccination permissions. On average, about a year, we decline about 4% of all permissions. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much indeed. Andrew?
I just wanted to add something else that goes to the broader audience in terms of, okay, one can see that immediately if this is achieved, there's a benefit to the breeder in terms of the the good bloodstock being available. And there's a benefit internationally in terms of owners worldwide being able to access that. But it goes beyond that to racing as well. There's a direct nexus here. I touched on it in the opening ceremony. Only 3 weeks ago, Hong Kong simulcasted the Sunmet meeting. We took 7 races and 25 million US was held on that in Hong Kong alone, which provides an income back to the local industry. But it goes much broader than that. I mean, we heard only a couple of hours ago from Korea. Korea is trying to get a policy where if there's a runner from Korea in an overseas race, then they can take that race and show it in Korea. So too Japan. Japan can only take races in for simulcasting purposes if there's a Japanese runner. This is why the international movement of horses is so important, not just to breeding in terms of the bloodstock here, but also to racing purposes. We need to see the great racehorses that are being trained by the Mike de Koks and the others in South Africa going overseas, and likewise the potential for horses to be able to travel here and race. That full engagement unlocks so much potential, which is, of course, is the theme of the conference.
And I mean, that's interesting, because I was wondering, even if it went the other way, that if you export the best, what's that doing for the domestic race scene, actually? I mean, it might be great for a few breeders, might be great for 1 or 2 trainers, but does that help the domestic scene at all?
David, definitely. You know, you can always raise a concern that, oh, our best horses will leave our shores. But then you must ask yourself, does England, Ireland, France, Australia have quality racing? I think the answer is obvious. Yes, they do. And the list goes on. Those horses move internationally. The movement of horses internationally, as Andrew just said, also allows horses to come here to race. The better blood coming here, the more owners will buy horses here. You'll get more foreign owners purchasing horses here. And one of the other things that we haven't touched on yet, and it's a byproduct of successful and sustainable movement of horses internationally and therefore international racing, you open the opportunity for international sponsorship in South Africa. South Africa becomes part of the world scene. Horses move around for the races. So no, it's not going to be something that will drain domestic racing in South Africa.
Let me ask you one other point about the arrangement that you've created, you developed with government and vice versa. And you did say in the course of your opening remarks that you're looking to grow it. There is clearly a risk that you've put a huge amount of effort into this, whether it's a risk or not is another matter, and it's worked. But why is there permanence there? What gives you that sense that you've now created something that is lasting?
We know that in order to move forward with our sustainability of our disease control systems, that public-private partnerships are the way forward. The world has also seen that. And let's just concentrate on that in a European context. They've seen that. They've announced it, the OIE. We in South Africa know that not only in our situation, but in other sectors of the South African agricultural, especially the agricultural economy, what they can see that we've created here is vital going forward for their own industries. How to sustain that? It must be sustained through exports. That is how it'll be funded in the future. And it just is a vital part. It's recognized by government. It's recognized by industry as the only way forward. We can't rely on governments around the world to be sustaining racing or any other industry. If industry benefits from X, they must work in partnership with government for the benefit of all.
This is a forum for exchange of ideas, information, knowledge transfer as well. Yeah. So I wonder, from the road that you have traveled now and the experience you've built up on that, and this is a question that's come from the floor, what would your advice be to countries who are looking to expand horse movements? How should they go about it? Who can help them?
I think one thing we've learned is that the world looks to the European Union as a gold standard. If you're not trading with the European Union, you're going to find it very difficult to trade with anybody else. The European Union has a very prescribed and transparent set of requirements for trade with them. Those things need to be looked at, see where your country complies and where it needs to work on, what special circumstances may need further negotiation. And then it's vital that there's, right at the beginning, a formation of a partnership between industry in that country and veterinary services, and not forgetting to bring in the Department of Trade, or whatever the name may be in the relevant country, and work within a tripartite agreement there to move forward. I'm just going to get John to expand a little bit on a system we've developed. Because in South Africa, you know, we're always looking at other countries. We're working now with the EU, but what next? And we've developed a system of how to take those countries, whatever the country may be, their import requirements, and then analyze where we can comply, what's non-applicable, etc. But I'll let John explain that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the important thing is, you know, you have to build your house on a strong foundation when it comes to setting up the system, and that includes the people that are involved. For very long in South Africa, the control of African horse sickness was seen as someone's side job or hobby, or something that they had an interest in, but it was never their goal, it was never their job description. So what you really need to do is put together a team of professionals that can do their job and do it well. And that's the only way you can build up any relationship with your government, so I would certainly suggest that. And then I think, you know, Andrew alluded to it a little bit, but you have to be open to participate with other countries. We're very fortunate to be included in the International Movement of Horses Committee, and what it allows us to do is build relationships between our counterparts all over the world. And what happens in it is you see how other people do it. So you don't have to build your system on what you think might be a good idea. You see how Korea or Australia or the EU might develop their system, and you tap into that. And we do that unapologetically. You know, we brutally do it because we know it's the only way to do it. So I think that's really important. And as Adrian says, really what we do is any country that approaches us, we evaluate their import requirements, and we judge it against gold standards that exist. And that is often the European standard, and it's the OIE standard. And we evaluate where there are deficiencies, where we can comply and where we can't comply. And we do it in a very organized, systematic manner. But really, for me, it's about professionalism. It's about treating it like a business, paying people well to do their job well. And if they don't do the job, then they shouldn't be doing it. And I think that is the bottom line, and it's something that we didn't do for too long in South Africa. So if I can give advice to anyone else, I would say do that. Yeah.
Right, and it's interesting because you talk about the EU as the gold standard, if you like. I think it's fair to say there's been a huge amount of frustration, nonetheless, for trainers, for owners, for breeders here, who feel that perhaps some of this is not fair and we could have done this sooner. You are clearly committed and bought into dotting every I and crossing every T so that there is no room for maneuver, if you like. This has to work. How easily have you been able to persuade the industry here that you're on the right track, it's coming soon, and it was worth the wait?
It hasn't been easy. I think one of the first things, and even in my own mind, when I got involved in this, I looked at it from a very commercial sense to start. Is this really necessary to do X, Y, and Z? Why can't we negotiate something different? But you have to understand that if you're working on an EU protocol as your gold standard, then there's very entrenched systems in place, and they're legislatively entrenched. You can't wave a magic wand and change legislation. You have to work within the existing legislation to reach the desired outcome. It's not only just about SPS measures here. There's also the trade side of things. I read an interesting article the other day and the UK owner and breeder, where Julian Richmond Watson, the head of the British TBA, voices his concerns about now in a post-Brexit world, will trade or movement of horses between the UK and the EU also get tied up in other sectors and become a trade negotiation part. And we've been down that road. We've been down the road of dealing with all the little parts. And it was a good article. They're aware of what could be coming their way. So it's more than just one thing. And I think our industry in South Africa has been waiting a very long time. There's always been frustration. When is this going to happen? Because it's just expense, 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 complying. And let's be honest, anytime you've got to comply with a movement system, it makes your own life more difficult. But that's what I said earlier. It's the faith that we've stayed there. We've had to learn that unless we stand united and continue to stand united, we are doomed to failure. There is no other way out. We either accept that we live in our splendid isolation, or you do what it takes to get onto the international stage.
Andrew, it's clearly been a long, painful learning curve, quite a sharp one in various places as well. What do you think is the message, though, to other countries, other members of the Asian Racing Federation, in terms of a learning process here, an education?
I think there are several takeouts. One is that it's possible. That's certainly important. I mean, there were some who, when this was first flagged, said to Winfried, I know, this is too difficult. But maybe that's Winfried. He didn't really hear that bit, that it was too difficult. It is possible to take on big issues if you're systematic about it. And that's the second takeout. You have to be systematic. And that's why if we've been able to do anything, then one of the things that I think we've been able to contribute is working together on the roadmap through the International Movement of Horses Committee to be systematic, to say this is the strategy and this is how we execute against it. I also think that it is key to have a team of absolute experts who are well resourced, and I don't think anyone would disagree with me after hearing the presentations today that South Africa has that in government, in quasi-private sector, and in terms of industry and the expertise that Adrian and John have brought to this process. It's the perfect embodiment of a public-private partnership. You can see the cordial relationship with them between public and private, the way industry and governments work together. It needs to be like that. We've seen that in terms of the relationship we've developed at the international level with the OIE, and it's being lived out here. So they, for me, are the three takeouts.
Thank you very much for that. It feels like we are possibly within a few weeks, let's say months from, as we would like to say at the conference, unlocking potential on this occasion for South Africa. Thank you very much indeed to all of our speakers here up on the panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, my wife's ringing me. Must be time to close. It is, actually. It's the end of 3 very busy days, as you know only too well. I think a lot of the discussion has been about issues which are ridiculously challenging now, and you know it. In a sense, this feels like a bit of a role model that stickability is really important. Being on the back foot is one thing. You've got to find a way to get back on the front foot. And I think for some of the issues that we've addressed, we've heard some ways in which that can be done. It's a long, slow, and tough road. I hope you found it absorbing. I certainly have. Thank you very much indeed for all your attention, for being in the hall. It makes so much difference, for your questions as well.